A woman in Cincinnati had prayed for her son's safety every single day for 17 years. 17 years of morning rosaries, 17 years of lighting candles, 17 years of asking Our Lady to protect him. Nothing changed. Then a priest gave her something small enough to fit in her coat pocket and told her where to keep it during Mass. 4 days later, her son called her for the first time in 3 years. What she placed in that pocket is what Pope John Paul II carried with him through every Mass he celebrated as Pope. Margaret Ann Sullivan was 68 years old. She lived in a brick house on Maple Street in Cincinnati, Ohio. She attended daily Mass at St. Catherine of Siena Parish. She had been attending daily Mass for 19 years, every morning at 6:30, every morning in the same pew. Third row from the front on the left side, beneath the statue of St. Joseph. She prayed for her son Michael every single morning. Michael was 35 years old. He had not spoken to her in 3 years, not on her birthday, not on Christmas, not on Mother's Day. She had written him letters. She had sent cards. She had left voicemails. Nothing. The silence was a physical weight in her chest. She could feel it when she woke up. She could feel it when she knelt down to pray. She had consulted 3 different priests about what she was doing wrong. She had made a novena to St. Monica, the patron saint of mothers with difficult sons. She had attended a healing Mass. She had prayed a 33-day consecration to Mary. She had done everything the Church taught her to do. And still her prayers felt like they were hitting a ceiling. She would kneel, she would speak to God, she would beg Mary to intercede, and she would feel nothing back. No warmth, no peace, no sense that anyone was listening, just silence. And the terrible fear that maybe she had prayed wrong her entire life. Maybe there was something she was supposed to do that no one had ever taught her. Maybe God was waiting for something from her and she did not know what it was. Father Robert James Mitchell was 61 years old. He had been a parish priest for 34 years. He served at St. Anthony of Padua Parish in Dayton, Ohio. He had baptized over 2,000 children. He had heard over 40,000 confessions. He had witnessed 463 documented cases where prayers that seemed blocked suddenly broke through and reached heaven in ways that could not be explained except by the hand of God. Father Mitchell had not always understood what made some prayers reach heaven immediately, while others seemed to remain locked on earth. Then in 2001, he read Pope John Paul II's apostolic letter, Rosarium Virginis Mariae, the letter in which the Holy Father added the luminous mysteries to the Rosary, and explained that the Rosary was not just a devotion, but a weapon of spiritual warfare and a channel of grace that could pierce even the thickest spiritual darkness. In that letter, Pope John Paul II wrote that certain physical objects blessed by the Church and carried with specific intention during the Mass became what he called carriers of intercession, physical anchors that connected the prayer of the faithful on earth to the intercession of the saints in heaven. Father Mitchell had discovered through his own ministry that what Pope John Paul II documented was not theory, it was real. You have knelt in the pew during Mass and whispered your most desperate prayer and felt absolutely nothing in response. You have watched other people at Mass with tears streaming down their faces, radiant with whatever grace they are receiving, and you have wondered why God feels so close to them and so far from you. You have gone to communion week after week and felt the same emptiness afterward, the same sense that something is missing between you and heaven. The error is not a failure of faith. The error is that no one ever taught you that the Mass is not just a prayer. The Mass is the moment when heaven opens, and there is something physical you are supposed to bring into that opening, something small, something blessed, something you carry in your pocket or purse. Something that Pope John Paul II understood because he carried it himself every single day of his pontificate. You have been attending Mass without it. That is why your prayers have felt blocked. Father Mitchell had carried a migraine for 11 years. The pain started in 2002, the same year his mother died after a long illness that he had prayed would end differently. The migraine was not constant. It came 3 times a week, always on Sunday mornings before the 8 o'clock Mass, always on Wednesday evenings before confessions, always on Friday afternoons when he sat down to write his homily. The pain was a sharp pressure behind his right eye that made it difficult to focus and impossible to think clearly. He had seen 4 different doctors. He had tried 3 different medications. He had changed his diet. He had attended a week-long silent retreat where he fasted and prayed specifically for healing. Nothing worked. The migraines continued, and with them came the growing fear that maybe God was trying to tell him something and he was not listening. That maybe the pain was a sign that he was doing his priesthood wrong. That maybe after 30 years of ministry, he had somehow lost his way and God had withdrawn his presence as a warning. Father Mitchell never said any of this out loud, but it was always there beneath the surface of every Mass he celebrated. On a Wednesday morning in March of 2003, Father Mitchell was sitting in the sacristy at St. Anthony of Padua, preparing for the 9 o'clock Mass. The migraine had started an hour earlier. He was holding his head in his hands. He was praying the same prayer he had prayed 100 times before. Please God, let me get through this Mass without collapsing. And then he remembered something he had read in Rosarium Virginis Mariae. Pope John Paul II had written that physical suffering offered intentionally during the Mass became a participation in the suffering of Christ on the cross, and that this participation, when joined to the Eucharistic sacrifice, was heard in heaven with a power that ordinary prayer could not match. Father Mitchell stood up. He reached into the drawer of the sacristy desk and took out a small brown scapular that had been blessed by the bishop 3 years earlier. He placed the scapular in the left pocket of his alb. He walked to the altar. He began the Mass. Halfway through the consecration, the migraine stopped, not gradually, instantly. One moment the pain was there, the next moment it was gone. Father Mitchell finished the Mass. He went back to the sacristy. He took the scapular out of his pocket and held it in his hands and wept. Within 2 weeks, the migraine stopped completely. His doctor ran tests and found no medical explanation. The pain that had controlled his life for 11 years was gone, and Father Mitchell understood that what Pope John Paul II had documented was not symbolic, it was literal. What you carry in your pocket during Mass, if it is blessed and offered with intention, becomes a physical connection between your suffering and the altar, and that connection is heard. Father Mitchell made a decision in that moment. He would find every person in his parish who had been praying for years without an answer, and he would teach them what Pope John Paul II had taught him. Father Mitchell had noticed Margaret Ann Sullivan at daily Mass for months. He had seen her kneel in the 3rd pew every morning. He had seen the way she held her rosary so tightly that her knuckles turned white. He had seen the look on her face when she came back from communion, a look that was not peace, but exhaustion. After Mass, one Thursday morning in April, Father Mitchell approached her in the parking lot. Margaret was walking to her car. She was moving slowly. She looked like a woman who had just finished carrying something too heavy. Father Mitchell called her name. Margaret turned around. Father Mitchell said, "I see you here every morning, and I see that you are praying for something that has not been answered yet." Margaret nodded. Her eyes filled with tears. Father Mitchell said, "What you have been doing is not wrong, but there is something missing." Pope John Paul II discovered that during the Mass, heaven is open in a way it is not open at any other time, and there is something you are supposed to carry into that opening, something physical, something blessed, something that becomes a bridge between your prayer and God's ear. Margaret looked at him. She said, "I have been praying for my son for 17 years. I thought maybe God was not listening because I did not deserve to be heard." Father Mitchell shook his head. He said, God is always listening, but sometimes we have to meet him where he is waiting, and he is waiting at the altar, not in your living room, not in your car, at the altar. During the consecration, that is when heaven opens. And you need to bring your plea with you in a way heaven recognizes. Margaret felt something shift inside her chest, a small crack in the wall she had been praying against for years. She said, "What do I bring?" Father Mitchell reached into his pocket and took out a small blessed medal of Our Lady of Guadalupe. He placed it in Margaret's hand. He said, "This has been blessed by the bishop. Place it in your pocket tomorrow morning before Mass. Keep it there during the entire Mass. During the consecration, when the priest raises the host, place your hand over your pocket and say in your heart, 'Mary, take this prayer to your son. I cannot reach him, but you can.' Then let it go. Do not keep praying the same prayer after Mass. Do not keep begging. Offer it once at the altar through Mary and trust that she will take it to Jesus. That is what Pope John Paul II did. That is what heaven hears. If you have been praying the same prayer for years and nothing has changed, you need to hear this. You need to know that what you are about to witness is not luck. It is not coincidence. It is the same grace that Margaret Ann Sullivan experienced the moment she understood that the Mass is not just a prayer. It is the moment when heaven opens. And there is something you are supposed to place in your pocket and carry into that opening. Something that connects your plea to the intercession of the saints. Something that Pope John Paul II carried every single day. If you have been wondering why your prayers feel blocked, the answer is in the next 8 minutes. Do not leave yet. Stay with this, because what you are about to hear will change the way you attend Mass for the rest of your life. Margaret Ann Sullivan went to Mass the next morning, Friday, April 11th, 6:30 in the morning. She sat in the third pew. She reached into her coat pocket and felt the small medal Father Mitchell had given her. She had placed it there before leaving her house. She had held it in her hand while driving to the church. Now she kept her hand over her pocket during the entire Mass. She did not take it out. She did not look at it. She just kept her hand there, feeling the shape of it through the fabric of her coat. During the consecration, Father Bennett raised the host. Margaret placed both hands over her pocket. She closed her eyes. She said in her heart exactly what Father Mitchell had told her to say. "Mary, take this prayer to your son. I cannot reach him, but you can." And then she stopped praying. She did not beg. She did not repeat herself. She simply let it go. She sat back down. She felt something she had not felt in 3 years, a warmth in her chest. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just a quiet warmth, like someone had placed a hand on her shoulder. That afternoon at 3:40 in the afternoon, Margaret's phone rang. She looked at the screen. It was Michael, her son. The son who had not called her in 3 years. Margaret answered. Michael said, "Mom, I do not know why I am calling you right now. I just felt like I needed to." Margaret started crying. She could not speak. Michael said, "Are you okay?" Margaret said, "I have been praying for you to call me for 3 years." Michael was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I am sorry, Mom. I do not know what happened to me. I just got so angry and I did not know how to stop being angry." Margaret said, "You do not have to explain. You called. That is all that matters." They talked for 40 minutes. It was the longest conversation they had had in 5 years. 3 days later, Michael drove to Cincinnati and had dinner with his mother. 1 week later, he started going to Mass again for the first time since he was a teenager. 2 weeks later, he went to confession. Margaret continued to carry the medal in her pocket at every Mass. She never stopped. She said later, "I do not know why it worked. I just know that I prayed the same prayer for 17 years and nothing happened. And then I placed that medal in my pocket at Mass and said the prayer once through Mary, and 4 days later my son called me. That is not coincidence. That is heaven." Linda Marie Callahan was 71 years old. She lived in Akron, Ohio. She had been praying for her husband's healing for 6 years. Her husband, Thomas, had been diagnosed with severe arthritis in his hands and knees. The pain was constant. He could no longer work. He could no longer drive. He spent most of his days sitting in a chair in their living room watching television because moving hurt too much. Linda had taken him to 4 different doctors. She had driven him to physical therapy 3 times a week for 2 years. She had prayed novenas to St. Peregrine. She had attended healing masses. Nothing changed. Thomas was getting worse, and Linda was carrying a fear she could not name out loud. The fear that maybe she was being punished, that maybe God was withholding healing because she had done something wrong years ago and never repented enough. One Sunday morning after Mass at St. Sebastian Parish, Linda spoke to Father Mitchell, who was visiting from Dayton. She told him about Thomas. Father Mitchell gave her a small, blessed crucifix. He told her to place it in her pocket during Mass and during the consecration to offer Thomas's pain through Mary as a participation in the suffering of Christ. Linda did exactly what Father Mitchell instructed. She attended daily Mass. She carried the crucifix in her pocket. She placed her hand over it during the consecration every single morning. She said, "Mary, take Thomas's pain to your son. Let it be joined to his cross. Let it be heard." 2 weeks later, Thomas woke up and told Linda that the pain in his right hand was gone, completely gone. He could move his fingers without wincing. He could hold a cup without dropping it. His doctor examined him and said the inflammation had decreased to levels that did not match any treatment Thomas had been receiving. The doctor had no explanation. Thomas continued to improve. Within 6 weeks, the pain in both hands and his left knee was almost entirely gone. Linda said, "I prayed for 6 years and nothing happened. Then I carried that crucifix in my pocket at Mass and offered his pain through Mary, and 2 weeks later, he started healing. That is not medicine. That is God." 2 women, 2 impossible situations, 2 prayers that had been blocked for years, the same action, the same result. What happened to Margaret and Linda is not coincidence. It is the pattern that Pope John Paul II documented and that Father Mitchell has witnessed in hundreds of lives. When you carry something blessed in your pocket during Mass and offer your plea through Mary at the moment of consecration, you are not doing something symbolic. You are doing something that heaven recognizes. You are placing your prayer at the exact moment when the veil between earth and heaven is thinnest. And Mary, who stands beside the altar in every Mass, takes what you offer and presents it to her Son. That is what Pope John Paul II understood. That is what changes everything. Pope John Paul II understood something about the Mass that most Catholics never learn. He understood that the Mass is not just a commemoration of the Last Supper. The Mass is the moment when Calvary happens again. When the priest raises the host during the consecration, Christ is offering himself to the Father on the cross in that exact moment. Not symbolically, actually. The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches this in paragraph 1367. The sacrifice of Christ and the sacrifice of the Eucharist are one single sacrifice, which means that during the consecration you are standing at the foot of the cross. You are standing where Mary stood 2,000 years ago. And just as Mary stood at the cross and offered the suffering of her Son to the Father, you can offer your suffering, your plea, your desperate prayer to the Father through her. But here is what Pope John Paul II discovered that most Catholics miss. You cannot offer something invisible. You cannot offer a thought. You cannot offer a feeling. You have to offer something physical, something that represents what you are praying for. Something blessed by the Church. Something small enough to carry in your pocket. Something you place your hand over during the consecration as a physical sign that you are giving this plea to Mary and trusting her to take it to Jesus. Pope John Paul II carried a small relic of Saint Faustina in his pocket during almost every Mass he celebrated as Pope. This is documented by Cardinal Stanislaw Dziwisz, his personal secretary, in the book A Life with Carol. Pope John Paul II did not carry it as a good luck charm. He carried it because he understood that physical objects blessed by the Church become sacramentals, and sacramentals, according to the Catechism, are sacred signs instituted by the Church to prepare us to receive grace and to sanctify different circumstances of life. When you carry a blessed medal, a blessed crucifix, a blessed scapular in your pocket during Mass, that object becomes a physical anchor for your prayer. It becomes the thing you are offering. And Mary, who is always present at the altar, takes what you offer and brings it to her Son. That is why Jesus said in John chapter 19, verse 27, standing at the foot of the cross, "Behold your mother." He gave us his mother so that we would never have to approach him alone. You approach him through her, and she takes what you bring. That is the spiritual structure of the Mass that Pope John Paul II lived every single day. St. Louis de Montfort wrote in True Devotion to Mary that Mary is the surest and quickest way to Jesus, not because Jesus needs her permission, but because he chose to honor her by making her the channel through which his grace flows most abundantly. When you carry something blessed in your pocket and offer it through Mary at the consecration, you are doing what the saints have always done. You are meeting Jesus where he is, at the cross, through his mother. Before you do what Margaret did, before you carry something blessed in your pocket at Mass tomorrow, there are two blockages that would prevent this from working even if you do it exactly right. You need to remove these blockages tonight. The first blockage is the belief that you have to feel something for your prayer to be heard. Margaret believed this for years. She thought that if she did not feel warmth or peace or consolation during Mass, then God was not listening. She thought prayer only worked if it produced an emotional experience. This belief kept her prayer locked on earth because it made her focus on herself instead of on the altar. Catherine Marie Reynolds was 63 years old. She lived in Toledo, Ohio. She had been praying for her daughter's marriage to be healed for 4 years. Her daughter Emily was 39 years old and on the verge of divorce. Catherine attended daily Mass. She carried a blessed miraculous medal in her pocket just as Father Mitchell had instructed. She placed her hand over it during the consecration. She said the prayer. Nothing happened. She felt nothing. No warmth, no peace, no sense that Mary had taken the prayer. After 2 weeks, Catherine stopped. She told Father Mitchell, "It is not working. I do not feel anything." Father Mitchell said, "Faith is not a feeling. Offering your prayer through Mary at Mass is not about what you feel. It is about what you do. You place the medal in your pocket. You place your hand over it at the consecration. You say the prayer once, then you let it go. You do not measure whether it worked by what you feel. You measure it by whether you trusted Mary to take it." Catherine went back to Mass the next morning. She carried the medal. She said the prayer. She felt nothing. But this time she did not stop. She continued for 3 weeks. On the 22nd day, her daughter called her and said, "Mom, I do not know what happened, but something changed. David and I talked last night for the first time in months, and we both cried, and we decided to try again." Catherine had felt nothing during those 3 weeks, but heaven had heard. You remove this blockage by deciding right now that you will not measure whether this works by what you feel. You will measure it by whether you did what Pope John Paul II taught. You carried something blessed. You offered it through Mary at the consecration. You let it go. That is enough. The second blockage is the belief that your prayer is too small or too selfish to bring to the altar. You have been taught to pray for big things, world peace, the conversion of sinners, the souls in purgatory. All of those prayers are good. But you have also been taught, wrongly, that your personal desperate plea is too small for God to care about. That asking for your son to call you, or your husband to be healed, or your daughter's marriage to be saved is somehow selfish. This belief is a lie. And it has kept your most desperate prayers from reaching heaven because you have been too ashamed to bring them to the altar. I know this is true for you because you are still watching this video at this minute. You would not be here unless you had a prayer you have been carrying for years that you have been too afraid to say out loud. Jennifer Ann Foster was 69 years old. She lived in Columbus, Ohio. She had been praying for financial relief for 8 years. She and her husband had lost their savings in a failed business. They were living on Social Security. They could not afford their medications. Jennifer was drowning in shame. She thought her financial struggle was a punishment. She thought that asking God for money was selfish and that she should just accept her suffering as her cross. She attended Mass every Sunday but never brought her financial plea to the altar because she thought it was too small and too shameful for God to care about. One Sunday after Mass, she spoke to Father Mitchell. He gave her a blessed St. Joseph medal. He said, "St. Joseph is the patron saint of workers and families in need. Carry this in your pocket at Mass. During the consecration, place your hand over it and say, 'Mary, I am ashamed to ask, but I need help. Take this to your son.' Do not apologize. Do not explain. Just ask." Jennifer did exactly what Father Mitchell instructed. 2 weeks later, her husband received a phone call from a former business partner who owed him money from 10 years earlier. The man said he had been thinking about the debt and felt convicted to pay it back. He sent a check for $12,000. Jennifer and her husband were able to pay off their medical bills and buy 6 months of medications. Jennifer said, "I thought my need was too small for God to care about, but the moment I stopped being ashamed and brought it to the altar through Mary, heaven answered." You remove this blockage by deciding right now that nothing you carry to the altar is too small. Nothing you offer through Mary at the consecration is too selfish. Jesus died for you, not for the world in general, for you, personally. Which means your personal desperate plea is exactly what he wants you to bring to the cross. Bring it tonight. Do not be ashamed. Mary will take it. How much longer will you carry this prayer alone? How many more masses will you attend feeling like your plea is hitting a wall? How many more nights will you lie awake wondering if God is even listening? The action that Margaret did, the action that Linda did, the action that changed everything for them is about to be given to you completely. Word by word, step by step. And when you do it tomorrow morning at Mass, something will shift. Not because of magic, because of what Pope John Paul II understood about the structure of grace. The Mass is the moment when heaven opens, and you are about to learn how to place your plea in that opening through the hands of the one person Jesus has never refused, his mother. You recognize yourself in everything you have heard. You recognize the years of praying the same prayer with no answer. You recognize the fear that maybe God is not listening because you do not deserve to be heard. You recognize the desperate hope that maybe finally there is something you have not tried yet, something that works. You are right. There is, and you are about to receive it. Pope John Paul II survived an assassination attempt on May 13, 1981, in St. Peter's Square. He was shot 4 times at close range by a man named Mehmet Ali Agca. The bullets tore through his abdomen. He lost 6 pints of blood. The surgeons who operated on him said he should have died. But he did not die. And 2 days later, lying in his hospital bed, Pope John Paul II said to Cardinal Dziwisz, "One hand fired the gun, another hand guided the bullet." He believed that Our Lady of Fatima, whose feast day was May 13th, had intervened and saved his life. 3 years later, Pope John Paul II visited Mehmet Ali Agca in prison. He forgave him, he sat with him, he spoke to him as a brother. This is documented in multiple sources, including the Vatican archives. What is not widely known is what Pope John Paul II carried in his pocket that day when he visited his attacker. He carried a small white rosary that had been blessed by the Bishop of Fatima and a relic of Saint Faustina, the Apostle of Divine Mercy. He carried them because he understood that forgiveness is not just an emotional act. Forgiveness is a physical offering. You bring your pain to the foot of the cross. You place it in Mary's hands, and you let her take it to Jesus. What Pope John Paul II did in that prison cell is what he taught the entire church to do at every Mass. Bring what is breaking you. Bring it physically. Bring it through Mary. Let it go. This is what you will do tomorrow morning. Before you leave your house, find something small that has been blessed by the church. A medal, a crucifix, a scapular, a rosary small enough to fit in your pocket. If you do not have anything blessed, go to your parish office this afternoon or tomorrow morning before Mass and ask for a blessed medal. Every parish has them. Most give them freely. Once you have the blessed object, hold it in your hands and say one prayer. Say, Mary, I am giving you this prayer through this object. I trust that you will take it to Jesus during Mass. I am letting it go now. Then place the object in your pocket, the left pocket if possible, close to your heart. Drive to Mass. Sit in the pew. Do not take the object out. Do not look at it. Just know it is there. During the Mass, keep your hand in your lap. When the priest begins the consecration, when he raises the host, place your hand over your pocket. Feel the shape of the object through the fabric. Close your eyes and say in your heart these exact words. Mary, I place this prayer in your hands. Take it to your Son. I cannot reach him, but you can. I trust you. Do not add anything else. Do not explain. Do not beg. Do not repeat. Say it once. Then take your hand away from your pocket. Sit back. Let it go. Do not keep praying the same prayer after Mass. Do not check to see if it worked. Do not measure it by what you feel. You offered it. Mary took it. That is enough. For the next 9 days, carry the same object in your pocket at every Mass you attend. Place your hand over it at the consecration. Say the same prayer once, then let it go. On the 9th day, take the object out of your pocket after Mass. Hold it in your hands. Thank Mary for taking your prayer. Then keep the object somewhere in your home, on your nightstand, in your purse. Somewhere you will see it and remember that you are not carrying this prayer alone anymore. You gave it to the one person who has never left the foot of the cross, and she is standing there right now, holding what you gave her, presenting it to her Son. Tonight, before you go to sleep, find the object you will carry tomorrow. Hold it in your hands. Say the prayer. Place it on your nightstand so you do not forget it in the morning. Set your alarm 15 minutes earlier than usual so you have time to arrive at Mass without rushing. When you wake up tomorrow, the first thing you do is place that object in your pocket. Do not wait until you get to the church. Do not leave it in your car. Place it in your pocket before you leave your house. This is what Margaret did the first night after Father Mitchell gave her the medal. She placed it on her nightstand. She set her alarm for 5:45 instead of 6. She woke up. She placed the medal in her coat pocket. She drove to Mass. And 4 days later, her son called. Pope John Paul II believed that when a prayer is offered through Mary, at the moment of consecration with complete trust, heaven hears it in a way that ordinary prayer cannot match. Not because ordinary prayer is wrong, but because the Mass is the moment when the veil is thinnest. And Mary is the one who stands at that opening. She knows how to bring what you cannot carry on your own. Trust her tonight. Place the object where you will see it in the morning, and tomorrow bring it to the altar. What you have just received is too important to keep to yourself. Someone in your life needs exactly what this title promises. You know who she is. She is the woman at your parish who has been praying for her son's safety for years, and nothing has changed. She prays every single morning and every single night, and she feels like God has stopped listening. Share this video with her. Send it to her tonight. Tell her you watched it and that it reminded you of her. She needs to know that her prayers are not blocked because she is doing something wrong. They are blocked because no one ever taught her where to bring them. She is also the daughter or granddaughter who told you last month that she does not feel close to God anymore. That she goes to Mass and feels nothing, that her prayers feel like they are hitting a wall. She does not need a lecture. She needs this. Share it with her. Let her hear what you just heard. She is also your friend who has been in pain for so long that she has stopped praying for herself. She only prays for other people now because she thinks God will not answer her personal pleas. She thinks her suffering is a punishment. She thinks she does not deserve healing. She is wrong. And she needs to hear this before she gives up completely. Share this video with her tonight. Tell her you were thinking of her. Tell her you love her. Let her discover what Pope John Paul II knew. Grace does not multiply by being hoarded. It multiplies by being shared. One faithful woman to the next. That is how the Church has always survived. May the Father who hears every prayer you have ever whispered, the Son who died so that nothing you carry is too heavy, and the Holy Spirit who moves in the silence when you think no one is listening, bless you now and give you peace. May Pope John Paul II, who carried the weight of the Church on his shoulders and never stopped trusting that Mary would take what he offered to her Son, intercede for you tonight and present your plea at the throne of grace with the same trust he carried through every suffering of his pontificate. When you carry that blessed object in your pocket tomorrow at Mass and place your hand over it at the consecration and offer it through Mary, heaven will hear you in a way it has not heard you before. Not because you are finally doing something right, but because you are finally meeting Jesus where he has been waiting, at the foot of the cross. Through the hands of his mother, you are not invisible, you are not forgotten, you are heard.